Hi, my name is Jimmy Schindler. Not sure you're going to be clapping that hard at the end of this, but I'll take it up front. So today we're going to be talking about suffering. So perfect Bible verse. Did you know I was talking about suffering today?
No, I knew you were coming, hopefully, but...
Yeah. So divine providence there, I think. And anxiety and fear. So lots of fun things that we're going to talk about today. I am Joe's uncle. And if I'm ever up for sainthood, he'll just show him the text of me talking smack and Xbox, and that'll squash that. So, and then obviously I know Josh pretty well. And again, Jimmy Schindler. I'm from Fort Wayne, Indiana. I went to St. John the Baptist grade school in Fairfield, not in New Haven. I went to Bishop Luers High School, did my undergrad at Notre Dame, so I suppose I'm not quite as dumb as I look. And then afterwards, I went and worked for my family. They used to own Banditos back in the day, my family did. Did my grad school at Purdue and got my MBA there. And then afterwards, obviously, my wife and I now, we have Guadalupe's Mexican Grill. I cannot cook. People are always like, how do you own restaurants and you can't cook? I'm like, well, we hire a chef. He's amazing. He's from Mexico. But it's not me, that's for sure. So lots of very good people who work for us. We have 5 kids. We're extremely blessed to have 5 children, ages 11 to 4. As you'll hear today, I had cancer and chemo, and we didn't think it was even possible to have kids. You know, they asked us, do you want to freeze your sperm? Do you want to do these things that are against the Catholic teaching? We said, absolutely not. We will never do that. And we just found out 6 months ago my wife's miraculously pregnant with our 6th. So, yeah, thanks be to God for that. So, very, very blessed. My wife is an absolute saint, as Jill will attest to. She is a research scientist. So, I sell tacos, and my wife is a scientist, and I am not the smart one. There is no doubt about that. She helped take care of me through my cancer. Just an amazing woman, and very, very thankful for my spouse. So let's get into the most fun topic ever, which is suffering. It's going to be great. And I mean, you guys almost covered everything today, so we didn't even talk today. But I like to start out with a few saint quotes, church father quotes, because most people in society have this view of suffering that, woe is me, I've got sick or whatever happened to me, and why is this happening to me? So I'm going to read 3 quick quotes because I have chemo brain and I can't remember everything. The first one's from St. Augustine. Let us understand that God is a physician and that suffering is a medicine for salvation, not a punishment for damnation. It's like, wow, like he's talking about suffering literally being a vessel to get you to heaven, right? It's not a punishment. This is from St. Ignatius of Loyola. If God sends you many suffering, it is a sign that he has great plans for you, and he certainly wants to make you a saint. You know, so again, talking about the more sufferings you have, the closer to Christ you're getting and the better chance of becoming a saint. And the last one's from Sister Mary Faustina. If the saints were capable of, the angels were capable of envy, they would be envy of 2 things, the Holy Eucharist and suffering. You know, and that's pretty powerful to hear. Those are the 2 things that the angels would be jealous of. Christ chose. He didn't die to eliminate suffering. I think somebody said that tonight, right? He didn't die. I mean, we've stubbed our toe. We've had emotional suffering. But he did use it as the vehicle for redemption, right? The cross, the most painful, awful death that you could ever imagine. Society thinks suffering is wrong. We've talked about that. That's what society says. They tell you that any uncomfortable situation, any suffering is wrong. And we've given a couple of Bible verses and other examples tonight. But one of my favorites is, and we've all heard this, is when Jesus tells Peter, hey, listen, I'm going to suffer and I'm going to die on the cross. And St. Peter starts saying, no, you can't do that, right? This is bad. And what does Jesus say to St. Peter? He says, get behind me, Satan, right? And that part of that is over suffering, right? It's like his purpose is to come and to die. And that's what Satan was trying to do, take the easy way out. And so it's just over and over and over. If you read the church fathers, if you read the saints, if you read scripture, you'll see that suffering is beautiful and it can be meaningful. Right? The problem with me, before I reverted to the faith and did these things was we all want to have Easter, but we don't want to have Good Friday before that, right? We don't want to do that. How can we be arrogant, and myself was included, how can I be so arrogant to think that Jesus Christ, who is God, died on the cross and suffered the most excruciating pain ever? Mary, his mother, right? Mary, his mother, had to watch her son be tortured to death on the cross. The amount of emotional suffering that this woman had, I can't even fathom. And so we can't think that we're going to be immune to suffering. It's part of part of the human condition. And I was going to start this, and I think it's important to say, like, I was going to say, well, do you think suffering is evil? And a lot of people kind of like, that's a weird question. Of course it is. But that's not necessarily what the church teaches. They teach that it's part of the human condition as a result of the fall. But suffering can be transformed. It can be transformed through your faith. It can be transformed through redemptive suffering. Suffering brings us closer to Christ. Padre Pio once, a lady came up to Padre Pio. Everyone knows who Padre Pio is. And this woman's like, Padre, I'm in so much pain. I've had this horrific back pain for like 20 years. I can't walk. I'm in excruciating pain. I can't take it. Like, what's your advice? And he like grabs her and he says, you are so lucky. I can't believe that you get to suffer. Like, that's amazing that you get to go through that kind of suffering. And she's like, what the heck is wrong with this guy, right? Like, something's wrong with him. But that is what the church teaches. That is like the joy, as we read in the reading from Peter today, of how the attitude that we should have. The idea is, Pope John Paul II said it, don't waste your suffering, right? Don't waste it. Redemptive suffering is the idea that when you're suffering in the most horrific manner, when you're in your deepest, darkest spot, that instead of, woe is me, why is this happening? Why did I get a divorce? Why did my kid get cancer? Why do I have cancer? Why did I get fired? You take that suffering and you say, I'm going to offer this up in prayer for others. Okay, I'm going to weaponize this for good, because good can come from bad. I think one of the most, probably the best argument for atheism is the fact that why do good things happen to bad people? Like, why does evil exist, right? But I think it falls short because we don't know what God's plan is. We don't know why suffering is always allowed to happen. But good can absolutely come from evil. And I think you'll see that today with me personally. I will say that I'm the absolute last person I ever thought would be up here talking to you. If you would have asked me this, like, I don't even know, maybe around 2011, I would have said, there's no way. Like, what are you talking about? I'm a reaver. I didn't go to church for 10 years. I literally had no business being up here. I did not take my faith seriously. But then when I did revert, I started doing things like this and studying scripture, and I understood. I thank you to God, before I started suffering, I understood these Catholic concepts, and I think it's what got me through my experience. Another quote, St. Francis de Sales, he said that anxiety or fear is the worst thing that can befall your soul except for sin. The worst thing that can befall your soul except for sin. God commands us to pray, but he forbids us to worry. You know, in the Sermon on the Mount, it talks about the lilies spinning and toiling. It talks about the birds not worrying where the next meal is coming from. As Catholics, we are not allowed to worry. We're not. Like, we are commanded to pray, to weaponize our suffering for good. So this story kind of starts out at the start of COVID. My business was shut down at the time. It was a really crazy time. My father was in hospice care, suffering immensely. My son, Maximilian, was actually going through life-threatening surgery. I won't go into too much detail there for the sake of time. But I was just completely calm. And my wife actually was really angry with me. She's like, why are you so calm? Our son could die. Your dad's in hospice. Your business is shut down. What is wrong with you? Why are you not upset? And I kind of looked at her and I just said, I mean, we're not supposed to worry. And I've thought about the worst case scenario. I think that's really helpful for me, was to envision the worst case scenario. I said to her, if my business shuts down, I've been given enough gifts from God that I think I could start over at this point. I'm pretty young. If my son Maximilian dies, he's not at the age of reason. He's baptized. If he dies, he goes to heaven. End of discussion. That's church, right? And so I'm like, and that sucks for us. That's horrible. But my kid going to heaven, I mean, that's not necessarily a bad outcome, right? And if my father dies, it's merciful. He is suffering immensely, and he's doing it with such grace. But if he dies, it's merciful. And she kind of was just like, okay. It's like, it's rational, it's logical. I'm not an emotional person. But that's kind of how the way I looked at it. And it ends up the business came out of it. My son, he miraculously lives, thanks be to God. And then my father passed, which was merciful. So then, right after all that happened, we have a little lull, right? And then COVID's going on. And I get sick with COVID close to Christmas time. And I had 104 fever. I mean, I was almost hospitalized. It was really bad. I finally had a bunch of shots. I was okay. Had a 2-week lull period. And then after that 2 weeks, I got sick with the flu. I was one of like the 3,000 people that had the flu that year, right? And then after that, I'm still freaking sick, right? And the doctors are like, what is wrong with this guy? What is wrong with him? Something is drastically wrong. And I don't know if you guys know, but my doctor, Dr. King, I've known him since I was this high. He was feeling right here, and his face turned pale. And I've known this guy my whole life. He's like another dad to me. And I just knew something was really, really wrong. And, you know, I'm a healthy guy. I was like in this kind of shape before cancer. I was working out. I'm like, I'm at peak fitness. Never thought about death. Like, I'm in my 30s. I'm going to die when I'm 85. This is like, who thinks about death when you're 30? Nobody. I'm going to have all these plans. Jimmy, you have stage 3B nodular Hodgkin's lymphoma. The tumors are so big in your chest that they've crushed your stomach. You can't eat. You're down like 70 pounds. And we don't think you're going to be here in a week, So like you hear that and you're like, that sucks. like that's not ideal, right? But I was never angry. I mean, I was just like, okay, well, I'm going to be joyful through this, as Scripture says, as the church teaches. I'm going to try and spin this in the best way possible. I don't know what the outcome's going to be, but I'm going to do what I'm told to do from the Catholic Church to try and get through this thing. And I can see, man, if you did not have faith, right, why is this happening to me? This is unfair. This is unjust. I have 5 kids. I have a business and employees. Like, what the heck is wrong? Like, this is unacceptable. How can this happen? You can walk through that mentally of how upset you would be if you didn't have the faith. But I was just kind of like, it's not my soul to begin with. It's not. It's God's soul. So let his will be done. I mean, I don't want to die, but I'm not going to bemoan it and sit there and whine about it. And when you lie on your deathbed, I can say from experience, I've done it 3 times, and I'll touch on all 3. This is the first one. You don't think about your money or your Bitcoin or your business. I mean, the only thing that I thought of was my faith in Christ, my family, and I thought about just how I helped humanity. Like, never once did I think about my material possessions. And I had this epiphany. I'm like, I was working 80-hour weeks, barely saw my family, went to church 1 hour a week, about as lukewarm as you could possibly get, even as a revert. And I had this epiphany that my only job as a father is to get my kids to heaven, and I'm giving myself an F. Like, I'm not doing a good job. Like, this is not good. And so I kind of made a deal, not with God, but with myself. I said, if I miraculously live through this somehow, I'm going to do it way, way differently. And I did. So anyways, I text my wife, hey, I got lymphoma, I need you to come meet me. She didn't really know what it was. She shows up to the oncology place, and she just breaks down, because obviously she knows what the oncology center is. It really made our marriage much closer through this. We did a 33-day consecration to Mary. As part of that consecration, we read a story about Mother Teresa, and it talks about this woman, again, who's suffering immensely. And Mother Teresa's talking to this woman, and she says, listen, when you're in your deepest, darkest spot, it's like Christ is so close to you, he's kissing you in the forehead. That's how much closer to Christ you are. And the lady exclaims, then have him stop kissing me, like, please. She just, like, exclaims it. And so we kind of cried and laughed through that. But it's not roses and unicorn, man. When you're going through suffering, you try to be joyful. You try to be happy. My sister Heidi once called me. I don't remember this phone call. She's like, I was so mad at you, Jimmy. You were so joyful. And I could just tell on the phone, like, even though you were so sick, I could barely talk, like, you were just so joyful. And she's like, I would have been so mad at God if that would have happened to me. And you're sitting there all happy and talking to me as you're suffering. I'm like, I don't remember that, but I'm glad I was happy. But I was also grumpy. So, when you're suffering immensely, man, it's hard to be happy. It really is. If you've ever been through some serious pain, it's hard to be in a good mood. And I told my wife after all this, I said, honey, and Joe's heard this. I said, was I a little grumpy a few times when I was in the worst of my suffering? And she said, yeah, honey, you were a little grumpy, made a little snappy a few times. I said, listen, you saved my life. I'm so appreciative of you, and I'm really sorry. I forgive you, Jimmy. It's okay. And I said, I bet there was a few times during the cancer that you were probably rooting for the cancer, weren't you? She burst out laughing for like 20 minutes, and at the end she goes, and I'm like, you didn't say no. Like, eventually she did say no, but it was kind of like one of those just funny moments where went through that. So that was experience number 1. A year later, I'm recovering from chemo. I'm in remission, thanks be to God. But my immune system is shot. I'm in bad shape. I'm still skinny. I'm recovering. My wife goes to church. I had 911 her at church. I'm like, something's wrong. I'm coughing up blood. Something is really, really wrong with me. And I get to the hospital. I had walking pneumonia that metastasized, and I actually went septic. So if you know what sepsis is, it's an infection of your blood. And it's really bad. Like 30% survival rate if you're healthy. I was not healthy. So my wife's having this conversation where she's like, you're going to save him, right? And the doctors are like, we're going to try. And I'm like, what the hell is that supposed to mean? Like, that's not right. And so I'm like, please call a priest. That's when Father Kale comes up and gives me, anointing the sick, whatever, for the first time of many times. And it was like an ER episode, they're like taking your vitals and stuff. And then all of a sudden you see like all these nurses running because my blood pressure is so low. And all these people are in this room, and it's almost surreal. You're sitting there like, what is going on? Am I going to make it through this? My wife is sobbing. And, I also had antibiotic resistance because through chemo, you're on antibiotics because you have no immune system. So I had this antibiotic resistance. I mean, it looked really bad. But again, miraculously, I lived through it. That was number 2. I was in ICU for several weeks. I was only out a week, and all of a sudden, I had this horrible side pain, like in my ribs. I'm like, oh, my gosh. On the right side, right where Christ is pierced, right? Coincidence probably. But I told her, we got to go back to the hospital. Something's wrong. I had this thing called pleurisy. So what pleurisy is when your ribs separate from your lungs, and you get fluid in there, okay? They're like, hey, bedside procedure, we're going to take a needle through your back, and we're going to drain this fluid. It's a bedside procedure, no big deal. What they didn't know was they actually had severed an artery when they did that, and they didn't know it. So I start bleeding into my chest cavity, and they don't know it. Because the symptoms are similar to pleurisy, but they're exacerbated to the nth degree, right? And so I am in really bad shape at this point, in really bad shape. I'm screaming. Like I am. If you would have heard me through a door, you would have thought like in the movies where like to torture somebody, because I'm just in the most excruciating pain. And again, what was happening is my chest cavity is filled with blood, my lungs are collapsing under the pressure, and it was so bad. Like, and this happened through cancer too. I was in so much pain at times where, I didn't want to die, but dying would have been merciful. Like it really would have been. And if it wasn't for people's prayers, for my wife's support, and the redemptive suffering, maybe I wouldn't have made it. I'm screaming for pain meds. And through this experience, so this is the experience where it really came to fruition for me on the redemptive side. I mean, I did a lot of the praying when I had cancer and stuff, but it wasn't like excruciating pain. It was more just like constant dull pain, but like to the point where it almost mentally breaks you down. This is like, I just got shot. And the ambulance picks me up. They move me from DuPont to Lutheran because they can't fix me. I can't breathe in the ambulance. I thought I was going to die. They're like screaming at me to breathe because they didn't know that my lungs were collapsing. And I remember getting to the hospital, and Father Cale had showed up to this. Hopefully you're okay with me talking about this. And I remember I had been praying for a couple causes. I had prayed for this baby named John Joseph, who had born with a half a heart. My friend told me, he's like, this baby will not live. I need you to pray for him. And I said, sure. And then the second cause was Bishop Rhodes had talked to me and said his cousin had an aneurysm, who was a priest, and he wasn't going to make it, 100% not going to make it. Can you pray for him? Yeah, no problem. And the last thing was, I was in this room, I had prayed for those 2 causes a lot, and I'm just screaming, and I just yelled at Father Cale. I was like, man, I just need something to pray for. Like, I have nothing to pray for, and I can't suffer unless I can use it redemptively. Like, what do you have? And he's just like, hey, I need you to pray for this little girl named Rhea. And, it's a bad situation. It looks like the adoptive parents are going to lose her. They've had her, and I need you to pray for her. And he showed me a picture of her. And so I'm going through like the worst suffering. I'm not comparing my suffering to Christ, but even to share in a sliver of the cross, I'm thankful for. But the suffering was so intense. And the whole time I'm just praying for this little girl. And I'm like, I don't know this girl, but I'm praying for her that her family can keep her and that she can be Catholic. And like, please God, assist in this, because all 3 of these causes look pretty hopeless. And if anything, use this suffering for something good. Like again, make this evil, make something positive come out of this. And to my shock afterwards, I learned that the priest lived, miraculously. I have no idea how this guy lived. The baby is still alive today, and the Rhea thing completely worked out. And you're just sitting there going like, oh crap, like that's crazy. And then you had other things, like just other miracles that happened through the cancer and stuff, where I had people who went back to church because of my suffering, people who started praying daily rosaries because of my suffering. I even had an atheist friend who started praying because of my suffering. And I'm like, if God can use my awful disease and my awful near-death experiences to move people, then so be it. And if I have to die, that's okay. Like, as long as it advances the mission and I do it joyfully. So anyways, I want to go back to the story, kind of wrap up my last traumatic experience. So they poked a hole, these 2 trauma docs, Dr. Acris and Dr. Morgan, they were amazing. And they poked a hole behind my pec, and they're like, hey, we're going to drain this pleurisy fluid out of your chest cavity. And it was all blood, clots and blood. And they were freaking out. They're like, what is going on with this guy? So they did a couple other procedures. Right after they did this tube, I blacked out. So now I'm in a coma. I'm completely unconscious. I've been unconscious for hours, right? Unconscious, completely unresponsive. And my wife's like, what are we going to do? And they said, hey, we think something's really wrong. We need to cut his chest open. We need to do exploratory surgery, but we need to have 7 IVs to do the surgery. We got 6 in. His veins are collapsing, and we can't get the 7th one in. We've had several nurses, I don't know what it was, 4 or 5 nurses, they can't get in. If we can't get the IVs in, he's going to die because we can't do the surgery. So again, I'm in a coma, and I remember this as if it happened 5 minutes ago. I woke up, I can't picture her face, but there was a Hispanic lady standing over me, and she had a scapular hanging down in my face. And I woke up and I said, "You must be Catholic." And she jumped back and she's like, "You're awake?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you must be Catholic." Because I didn't realize I'd been out, right? And she goes, "Well, yeah, I am Catholic." And I go, "Have you ever heard of Guadalupe's Mexican Grill?" And she goes, "No." And I go, "That sucks." And she goes, "But I am I'm Catholic and I have a strong devotion to Our Lady. I actually have a tattoo of her on my back." And I remember I just closed my eyes and I just said, "Ave Maria, Hail Mary" in Latin. And I felt her jump and I said, "What happened?" And she goes, "Right when you said that, I got in your vein." Bam, I was out. I don't remember anything else after that. It was just crazy. And so, Katie actually had, I guess, I don't remember this, I was out, but she had to come and my wife had to say goodbye to me. She had to be like, "Hey, listen, you're probably going to meet Jesus. I'm sorry." I just didn't think that it was going to, I was going to make it, right? So, very traumatic for my wife. In fact, I did this speech to her earlier today, and she's sobbing as I'm doing the story because it's just kind of real for her still. But when I woke up, I remember I had the ventilator, and it was trying to breathe for me. I'm trying to breathe, so I'm fighting the ventilator, and they yank this thing out, and I say, "Where's Katie?" And she's like, "I'm right here." I remember grabbing my hand, and I said, "I appreciate you so much." And the nurse was like, "Man, we've heard people cuss and scream, but I don't think I've ever heard that before." But I bled internally for 54 hours. I had 13 bags of blood. 2/3 of the blood was in my chest cavity, collapsed my lungs. Like I said, I was on a ventilator. The doctor's like, "You're the luckiest dude ever. I've never seen someone go more than 6 hours with what you had. I've never heard of someone going more than 8 hours with what you have, and I have no explanation to how you're alive." Like I said, I'm so thankful to my wife, who's an absolute saint, and we both received an insane amount of graces through the process. I mean, it was really, really great. I tell people, I'm always like, "Man, my cancer and my sepsis and my internal bleeding is the biggest blessing of all time." And they're like, "It's a weird thing to say." But it completely changed who I am as a person. And I'll wrap up with something my wife said at the very end. But kind of to wrap up my speech, or whatever you want to call this, I want to give you a few takeaways that I learned from this whole experience. And my biggest, here's the takeaways that I learned from suffering immensely. In fact, the joke is, I see the bishop. I'm on the finance committee. I'm pretty close to him, and he actually calls me Job now because of all the crap that happened, which is funny. But listen, I can't say any player, man. I was a horrible example for my family. I was working 80-hour weeks. I was spending 1 hour at church, not doing any catechesis with my kids, not doing date nights with my wife, just objectively being a bad husband. And not everyone can do what I'm doing now. I'm semi-retired. I work 10 hours a week, but not everyone can do that. But I can tell you what you can do is you can work 35 or 40 hours a week, and you can catechize your children at night, and you can prioritize your family over work. And so, I think on your deathbed, you're going to realize that you shouldn't focus on things that get you further from heaven. What do they say? It's easier for the camel to get to the eye throw of the needle than a rich man to get to heaven. And so I was just after that I reflected, I go, man, I was literally working to get myself further from heaven. It's kind of weird to think about, right? But it's true. And you just have to have a different life perspective. I mean, you do. I've changed my life completely. And I'm not very, very bright. I mean, it took cancer and all this crap to smack me in the face and be like, "Hey, dude." Because if you were saying this stuff to me before I had all this, I'd been like, yeah, okay, whatever you say. But it is true. Every single night, not every night, most nights, my job is to get my kids to heaven, right? So we do New Testament verse, we read a whole chapter of the New Testament. We have a comic book, Old Testament. It's pretty violent, so we have to read that. We've read through the Baltimore Catechism several times. We've read the Letters of St. Ignatius of Antioch. Lots of different things with my kids. I mean, they're pretty sharp. And then we also do Latin prayers. You know how you can tell someone goes to the Latin Mass? They tell you in the first 2 minutes. So we're the crazy Latin Mass people. But all my kids, including my 4-year-old, can do the whole rosary in Latin because we do Latin prayers overnight, intentions. And to me, it's as a dad, that 20, 30 minutes that we do. Now, we do make it fun. We give them Skittles. We ask them questions. And the kids love it because it's if you get this question right, I'll give you a Skittle. But that kind of catechesis, I think, is needed as a father. And I had someone challenge me, a friend, a peer a business owner, said, "What do you do at night?" And I'm like, "Now I lay me down to sleep." And he's like, "That's all you do?" And he went through all he did. And I'm like, and now I feel shame. But it's important to catechize your kids and go through these things and help them understand the faith. The next point would be the Holy Spirit has used me to move others. Used me to move others. And I think that you guys have to understand when something bad happens to you, that doesn't mean that you can't use that for good. And I've said that over and over, but it's a really important point. I have neuropathy in my feet. I suffer a little bit every day. But again, as Padre Peter said, you're lucky to suffer. You're lucky. And I know that's hard to think about, right? Like, wow, you're lucky to have cancer and to have suffered, or you're lucky to have your kid have cancer, or all these other weird things that happen. But that's really the perspective that we should have as Catholics. Sharing in the sliver of the cross is a blessing. It's not a curse. Participation in suffering is infinitely better than reflecting on suffering. And I can speak that for experience. Unite your suffering with Christ. It's a short life and a long death. I mean, you might live to be 80 if you're lucky. How many years are you going to spend in eternity of hell or heaven? A lot longer than 80 years, right? So you have to have that worldview and that life perspective. It's easy to find joy in births. It's easy to find joy in weddings and other things like that. It's a lot harder to find joy. A lot harder to find joy in divorce. Kids get cancer, all these things, right? But that's really where the faith hits, the rubber hits the road, if you will. And so, Ignatius of Antioch, you have to read his letters if you haven't. It's this guy, he gets captured, he's a bishop, he's being transported to Rome to be fed to the lions. And this guy's like, the Christians are like, hey, we can save you, we're going to break you out. And he's like, no, do not save me. I want to go to the Colosseum, I want to be eaten by lions, I want my bones to be ground like flour for Christ, for bread of life. And I'm like, this guy is nuts. Like, what is going on with this dude? But that's the perspective you got to have, man. Like, you got to suffer joyfully and do it away. And the best compliment I got through all my suffering was our priest. He said to me, he's like, you suffered like a Catholic should, and you were about to die like a Catholic should. And I'm like, that's great. I really appreciate that compliment. The only fear, this is the last lesson I learned, the only fear that I have, because I don't have any fear of dying at this point. I don't have any fear of suffering. And I wake up every single morning and I say, thank you, Jesus Christ, for my life. Thank you, Blessed Mother, for praying for me, because I am genuinely thankful for every day. But the only fear that I have isn't suffering or death. The fear that I have is not suffering or dying in a way that glorifies God. That's it. That's my only fear that I have. And the last thing that I'll end it with is my wife. I told her maybe 3 weeks ago, and this was even powerful for me at the time. I've been through all this stuff, and I've learned all these lessons, and I feel like I've studied suffering to the point where it's like, oh my gosh, like this can be kind of crazy. And I said to her, I said, Katie, I was just frustrated one day with my neuropathy and some other stuff, and I just said, hey, Katie, I just don't know that I'm ever going to be like I was. Like, I don't think I'm ever going to be how I was, or normal, or whatever you want to call it. And she just looked at me, and she looked at me like completely puzzled, and I was just like, what? What's wrong with you? And she goes, Jimmy, you're a better Catholic, you're a better father, you're a better husband, and you're a better business owner. Like, why would you want to go back to how you were before? And I'm just like, lesson learned. Okay, I got it. So a little bit of wisdom from my wife there. But that's pretty much it. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about suffering and my experience. It was definitely unique. It was definitely powerful. Lots of miracles happening. And I just tried to approach it in the way that I think that Catholic Truth lays out. So happy to take any questions. I'll turn this off.